Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dyslexia Life Hacks Show. I'm your host, Matthew Head. And in this episode, I'm talking to Donna Stevenson. She is the Head of Training and Assessment at Succeed with Dyslexia. Succeed with Dyslexia is a non-profit promoting a greater understanding of dyslexia. They provide workplace assessments, coaching, industry consultation, and much, much more. She has previously worked for the British Dyslexia Association, starting off as an events and conference manager and working her way up to commercial training and development executive. As always, I'll put links to the BDA, Succeed with Dyslexia, and other things we talk about in the show notes, which will be available at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. Welcome to the show, Donna.
Thank you so much, Matt, for inviting me. I'm really excited.
No problem at all. So I was having a dive through your LinkedIn profile last night, researching for this, and you've been working in the dyslexia world for a reasonable amount of time. Starting off the BDA way back in, I think it was 2006, working your way through. Why did you think a career in kind of neurodiversity, specifically dyslexia, was the thing for you?
It's a great question, and it almost happened by accident. So I started my professional life firstly as a nursery nurse working with very young children. Then I went into primary teaching. Anyway, I took a career break to have my daughter, and I happened to be on a course around dyslexia, like a postgraduate course. And somebody on the course had said to me, I'm just about to step away from a job I'm doing at the British Dyslexia Association. This was in my hometown of Liverpool. It was at Liverpool John Moores University, actually. And this lady said to me, I think you'd be great at this role. There's only 6 months left into the role. And I know you're looking to get back into work after having a career break. So I thought, yeah, maybe I'll go for it. It was something I was really interested in, because I suppose being a teacher, you always want to do right by your students. And I was always fascinated about the children who seemed very resistant to the ways that we were trying to teach. And so I applied for the job at the BDA. I got the job. It was 6 months, as I say, before this mini project was ending. What we were trying to do was getting Liverpool City Council to become dyslexia friendly. It ended up, Matt, I was there for 17 years.
I assume not on the same project, right?
No, it wasn't.
Extend that 6 months out for 17 years.
No, the project did end, but BDA had said to me, why don't you stay on? So it just seemed, a perfect fit. As I say, because I had this background in education, I was always interested anyway. Now I look back, I had people in my family who had dyslexia and neurodivergence. So I was always aware of difference in those ways. And then going into education, as I say, I was always interested in the barriers, because I wanted to bring those barriers down in order to make sure, everybody reaches their full potential. So formally, I guess that journey, really came into its own while I was at BDA, from this project 6 months and then staying there for the best part of 20 years.
Yeah, I suppose it's effectively a 6 month job interview at that point, wasn't it?
I guess it was. I didn't realise at that point, but it was, it was a brilliant adventure. I loved it. And like you say, I did a variety of roles whilst I was there. I'd gone from working at my, in my own hometown. Like I said, it was a Liverpool City Council project with the British Dyslexia Association. Then I was very lucky. I worked at national level then. Ultimately then in the latter part of my time there, I was in the training team, and this was pre-COVID. So I used to travel around a lot and deliver training in education, but then workplace. And, I think if anybody would have said to me, from being a nursery nurse, I'm passionate about young children, that at this part of my career, and this is work I still do here at SWD, is working with adults in the workplace, I think I would have been absolutely gobsmacked, as we say in Liverpool. But I absolutely love it. I love it. So, yeah, very lucky.
And it's a bit of a change, isn't it? You've covered, well, I suppose, except retirees, most phases of life.
Yeah, I know. But what's something really funny is, I remember the first time BDA asked me to do a training with adults, and I thought, I don't know how to do this. I know how to teach young children, but I don't know how to teach adults. And I remember the very first time I did it, I'm going to be really honest, I was absolutely rubbish. And I was aware that I was rubbish. And that makes you even worse, because you think, gosh, I really can't do this. And I remember going home thinking, oh, wow, I really can't do this. And I hate that. I like to feel that I'm good at things. And actually, I don't know when it happened, but luckily it wasn't long after. I had this light bulb moment where I just thought, you know what, it's exactly the same, really. You're just working with people, happen to be little people or big people. And when I had that realization, that was it then. I was just flying. I loved it. And I just thought, yeah, why did I ever think this was different? It's not, it's, you just be yourself. So yeah, really interesting.
They take themselves off to the toilet. That's probably about the only difference, right?
Yeah, I suppose there are some little differences like that. Love it.
Yeah. So you mentioned your postgrad was in dyslexia, which was what led to hearing about the BDA job. What grabbed your interest in doing that? Why did you specifically start doing that?
Yeah, it was. I was, as I say, I was on a career break. I was doing some tuition whilst I was at home with the little one, and I just thought I want to do whilst I'm on kind of family leave. It wasn't maternity leave as such, of course. I was just having an extended break in order to have a career break. I knew I wanted to top up my teaching qualification. And to be honest, I actually can't remember why I decided on dyslexia. I think it was just, Matt, in terms of thinking, yeah, there's these barriers. I'd like to find out more about specific learning, as we used to call it a lot then, difficulties. I know we talk about differences now. So it was more that. And then absolute, just serendipity that I met this person on that course who was working at BDA. She wanted to step away and just had said, hey, there's this job happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just, I suppose, fate in some ways.
So I assume by all that you're not dyslexic yourself, or is that something you then found out later on?
No, I'm not. I do have dyslexia in my family.
Okay.
But I'm not dyslexic. I do consider myself to be neurodivergent, but not dyslexic. So no, I'm not. I know nowadays, we're not sure, are we, about whether we ask folks that, but I'm very relaxed about being asked around that. So no, I'm not. But I do have a lot of people close to me who are. So I feel, and of course with my line of work, I feel very aware, I suppose is the word, although I don't have that lived experience. I feel very aware of how it can impact in fantastic ways and then in areas of challenge as well.
That does lead me on to sort of one of the questions would be like, when was your first kind of inkling of dyslexic people? Was it something, like I've spoken about the previous guests and they're aware that dyslexia or neurodivergent people are the people who disappear off to other classes at school? Was there any of that in your life, or was it pretty much as you got to this postgrad, you're like, right, let's look into this now?
Yeah, it's a bit more personal, I guess, than that for me. My dad has dyslexia.
Yeah.
But he's, being the generation that he's in, we didn't use the word dyslexia, certainly growing up, but I was very aware of how it impacted on him. I'm not sure when we started to use the word dyslexia in terms of when we, he'd be chatting about some of the areas of challenge he had. But in that way, it was very close. I was very aware, he struggled with literacy and so on. As you know, as a child, you just take your parents, that was just normal for us, that he had that lived experience. It's only, I suppose, not as late as the postgrad, but I suppose in the 90s maybe, I suppose we'd started to say to him, do you think you might have dyslexia? He'd never been assessed. He doesn't want to be assessed, but it's pretty sure that he has dyslexia, to the point where he'd write you a birthday card, your name would be spelt wrong within it. I mean, he's a very accomplished guy, he's an electrician, but that, literacy and so on was a real struggle for him. So I was aware of it from very young age, but I didn't know the name of it, if you know what I mean, being a child, having a parent living with dyslexia. I just thought that's what that was what my dad was like. So, but obviously as I became more aware of difference in these ways, as I say, maybe it was the late 80s, the 90s, then I was aware that there was this thing called dyslexia, and increasingly, of course, what it is and, how it impacts on individuals. And of course, somebody in my own family as well.
And it's nice to have that personal tie-in, I guess, when you're doing all the training and stuff, and your career has been now in the sort of neurodiversity and dyslexia world, particularly. It's kind of nice to have a personal touch to it.
Yeah, I think so. And we talk a lot now about lived experience, don't we? It's greatly valued, and I'm so glad, because it's really, really important. And also, like I said, the family experiences as well. So I work with a lot of folks who are parents of kids with dyslexia, or somebody like me, an adult child of somebody with dyslexia, at a time where it wasn't really discussed. As I say, my dad didn't get assessed or anything, but certainly it's had a huge impact on his life. So yeah, I think this dyslexia and the other differences touch so many of our lives, don't they, Matt? This is not a niche subject. It's a huge issue, really. And I'm so glad now it's getting the awareness, I think, increasingly so as the years go by, that it deserves, including, this podcast, which I think is brilliant. As I told you, I am a fan. I'm an unashamed fan.
Well, thank you very much. It's always nice to know it makes an impact.
I was so excited when you reached out. I was.
I was a little bit taken aback by your reaction. I was like, wow. As the doing the very British thing of by the way, I do this thing that you may not heard of. And you're like, I've definitely heard of it.
Yes, I have, Matt. I'm sorry, this is a very badly kept secret, this podcast.
Yes. So, of course, and that's the thing. I think, particularly now, we're trying to sort of, I guess, normalize dyslexia. Some people are tall, some people are short, some people have got blue eyes, and some people haven't. It's just a thing, isn't it? And pointing out that assistive technology is a pair of glasses or it's a set of noise cancelling headphones is still, glasses aren't odd to people anymore, but noise cancelling headphones can be. So it's getting the awareness that there's always.
You're right. I think we're in a real transitional phase. I mean, you chatted a bit earlier about I've been around for quite a bit now in the community, and I guess I have it. I mean, it's absolutely flown by, which is a great sign. I think it means I'm having a great time. As I say, I'm one of those very lucky people who actually love what they do, and I never take that for granted. Nor do I take for granted the people that I get to work with. My goodness, the amazing people I've met along the way, and as I say, I've been around long enough now to be able to compare what it was like, say, in the early noughties to what it's like now. And it's getting better and better. We're not there yet. And I think sometimes we're in trouble, in a bit of a danger zone of maybe getting complacent or whatever it might be. We're not there yet, but my goodness, we are way underway of, getting to the places where we want to be. Where, as you say, neurodiversity is part of the differences that we all have in many different ways that make us the fantastically unique people that we are.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I agree, and that's really interesting. Obviously, you have the sort of one of the things that did spike my interest was the length of time you've been in the industry, so to speak.
Yeah. And I only look about 25, don't I, Matt? I was waiting for you to say that. I feel like you're not going to, so I'm just saying it instead.
It's a danger to guess people's age.
I started in this industry when I was 5. I'm just putting it out
there. Yes, but you were saying about dyslexia in the early 90s, which interestingly would have been when I was statemented with it as a 6-year-old.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And but it'd be really interesting to dig into how it used to look like back then, because excuse my ignorance here, because I buried my head about it for a very long time. So I was at 35 before I got really turned on to everybody around.
Right, yeah.
But I would have thought BDA was obviously around, but
yes.
The other charities and non-profit and organisations that exist now weren't around at the time. Obviously,
No.
medium's consumed in a different way. The jokes and how it was done in classrooms is different. So take us back to the early 90s when Ford Mondeos were the fancy new car. What did dyslexia in the wider society seem like at the time?
I think it was quite niche. I said to you before, this isn't niche, but I think in those days it kind of was. I think it was seen as a special, well, what did we call it then? Difficulty, disability. I know the word comorbidity used to be used a lot, which I always hated that word. It sounds real sinister to me.
It also sounds like a misuse of that word.
Yeah, comorbid difficulties and so on. I mean, some of the, we talk a lot now, about language being really important. I guess we didn't used to think in those days about words and language like we do now. And I think the language around difference was very different in those days. To me, so the early 90s, I was kind of nursery nursing, thinking about going into teaching. I qualified as a teacher in towards the mid 90s. It was as a teacher of children, it was seen as something quite minor, something that maybe you would consider as an afterthought. We didn't really think about teaching styles or anything like that in those days. And it was anybody, I guess, who didn't fit in, who was resistant to teaching. It was almost seen as, well, there's not really much you can do about that. And it's a bit of a puzzle and a mystery. And as I say, one of my passions was to think, well, how can I get this child to learn? In terms, I suppose, of from a teacher training point of view, and I kid you not, but I'd love to say it was different now. It kind of still is not where we'd like it to be. And I know this is part of the campaigning work that BDI have done for many years. I always remember, Matt, so I did a 3-year course. I know some teaching qualifications are 4 years. So I did 3 years. I did what was called a QTS in those days, BA QTS. And so it was 3 years. We had half a day in a whole 3-year course for all of special educational needs.
Right, yes.
All of those differences that children may experience. So as you can imagine, in that culture, dyslexia is a tiny part of, what you're aware of. So I also think, unfortunately, because I love the 90s, but I think this was a bit I didn't love. There was a lot of ignorance around lots of differences, but of course, dyslexia being one of them. Yeah, sure, the 90s were better than what the 70s were or the 80s.
Yes.
So every decade we are getting a little bit better. But as we look back now to those times, leave a lot to be desired. And I just don't, I don't know a lot about how folks coped in the world of work who had dyslexia. My dad actually went self-employed. So I think it got him to the point where he just thought, I'm getting out of the system. And, because he had very practical skills of his job, he was able to work as pretty much a one-man band in that way. But I'm not sure what the world of work was like for those with dyslexia in the 90s. Not great, I suspect. And a lot of people, call masking, what we call masking now, isn't it? Hiding who they were, desperately trying to fit in and minimize any difference so that you could fit in. So I suspect from a workplace angle, that's what was going on. Certainly my lived experience during that time is that dyslexia was not really discussed, and it was just a bit of an afterthought, really. Which is crazy to think I was in the world of education. That's the place where it definitely shouldn't be an afterthought.
No, you think it should be not a front-running subject, but a key kind of bit.
Definitely. Because I think what we understand now, Matt, is that if you're able to teach a most reluctant and resistant learner, then that's great practice for everybody, isn't it? I think we figured out as the years have gone by that actually becoming dyslexia friendly is brilliant for everyone, whether that's education or in the world of work, I think.
Yeah, what works for dyslexia works for everybody else.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think so. And you're pulling different talents out and actually sometimes making, in this case, because you talk about schools, sometimes lessons a bit more interesting because you're lifting it out of the textbook and doing something else.
Yeah, 1,000,000%.
I imagine, in 2006, you joined the BDA and you worked there for, was it 17 years?
Yeah.
So that's a big shift, change from that to when you left. How did you see things growing? Like, how did you see your career grow through it? Because obviously you're doing a lot of training and stuff from initially starting as events and conference management and then all the way up to commercial and training development. So that's a bit of a shift in gears, as well as how dyslexia sort of looked through the time you're there as the BDA keeps growing, because it's been around for a very long time, hasn't it?
It has. I think it's around 52 years old now. So yeah, it's been around for a fair old while. I mean, BDI had made a difference to a lot of fixed size. I actually remember I'd reached out to them during my teaching career, and that was, I've had this conversation with many folks who said, I remember BDI, I reached out to them when I was a student and they sent me some posters and lots of information. So I know for a lot of us, it has a real special place in our hearts and, the things that we've done. But to answer your question about the changes I saw, I was very lucky at BDI. I was given the international conference to look after. So I was very privileged to do 4 international conferences while I was at the British Dyslexia Association. So what they are is the flagship events that bring together, it's called international conference, international experts over a 3-day event. So we have, the absolute thought leaders and keynotes and people at the absolute top of their game talking about dyslexia, the other learning differences, and then emerging, academics and so on sharing, as well as people at grassroots, teachers coming to talk about great practice. And it was hard work, but I was very lucky to be part of that. Met lots of fantastic people who I'm still, in awe of now and keep in touch with. As I say, I'm very lucky in those ways. I suppose the changes I saw was, as we've discussed, Matt, it was more and more awareness of what these differences are, how they impact. I always remember, and this is really interesting now, thinking about where dyscalculia is. So this is around the difference around number, challenges and so on, where that is now in our understanding. When I first started looking after the international conference, that was kind of a newish idea, that there was this issue around number and maths, and maybe we should incorporate it into the international conference. So I'd watched that go from a tiny little gem of an idea to then becoming, as the years go by, a huge part of what we all talk about now. Dyscalculia is up there with the other learning differences, as it should be. So I suppose, to answer your question, it was just I suppose a snowball effect of everything just, gathering momentum and getting bigger and bigger and bigger in terms of the understandings. And again, like I said about the development from the 90s, I suppose it went from quite niche ideas to then being quite mainstream in those ways. And certainly in training, as I say, my passion then became workplace, and I spent a lot of time traveling around organizations. And again, it went from something like, well, maybe we should do this, something we might be interested in, or we kind of have to do it because of the Equality Act, to then actually we want to do it. This makes perfect business sense for us because we've got very talented colleagues who we want to figure out how to get the best from them. And that was very pleasing, actually, Matt, to see, I suppose, what you've worked really hard for happen, on your watch, that the people that you engage with are starting to get it. We get it now about neurodiversity, don't we? In terms of, it is really important. It's just part of our lived experience for many individuals.
Yes, I agree. And that's really nice to see it grow through your career with the BDA and obviously onto what you did post that. And it's interesting, isn't it, hearing how companies are turned on, and then it's like, well, it's part of the Equality Act actually. So I think that's the step change that's really working at the minute, is it's shifting from the sort of cynical, well, it's part of this act and we have to pay attention, to, we want to get the most out of our staff here. So how do we do that? And I think that shift makes a huge difference for the companies that are switched on to that.
Yeah. It's a real light bulb moment, I think, we've had over the last few years, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's funny. It's sort of, and it didn't come out of nowhere, but I don't know what the catalyst was, but it does seem to have heavily shifted.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you. I don't know if it was one thing, or I don't know how you feel about this. Is this evolution? We've all been working so hard across the whole of society, and then suddenly you get this groundswell, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that, and there's more. Information flows easier over social media, so more people are seeing things. Yeah. I think you just, what was a small niche gets that groundswell, and then there's lots of different organisations as well pushing it. And I think diversity has become more noticeable, and then as the diversity is different areas of diversity have sort of been on everybody's lips, and then it's like actually diversity means more than just these specific things. Yes. Here is neurodiversity as well as other diversities, and people are like, and starting to apply the same thinking. There is my sort of wild guess, I suppose.
No, I think you're right. It's really interesting, and as I say, I think this is a transitional time where we're not there yet, but you can almost sense, I think, Matt, we're not far off. It feels like we're nearly there, which I think is really exciting, actually.
I think so too. It does feel like there's going to be this kind of sort of flip over, and everything's going to hit the inflection point and take off.
Yeah.
One thing that was interesting to me was obviously, training and development. And you did the same training assessment with Succeed. Over the sort of length since you started the BDA to now, how has the tools changed? Because I'm always like, the technology and the learning techniques and stuff have changed and evolved over time. Is there anything particular you saw come down the pipeline? You're like, well, that's a game changer.
Oh, that's a great question. I think that the obvious one right after gate is COVID. I was at BDA. In terms of how we deliver training, for sure. Yeah. I was at BDA when the first part of the pandemic, we all started to suspect that this was actually something huge. And it was, if we remember, it was really scary. And I remember up until that point, everything we delivered in training was face-to-face.
Yes.
And I remember we'd had an emergency meeting and our schedules were wiped, as in, we had to do it ourselves and just cancel everything. And it just felt like, it was so scary. I mean, to think back to that, because training has been such a huge part of BDA, it just felt like, all our worlds were just closing in. It was incredibly scary. And then during the pandemic, we'd figured out that virtual, we'd all got virtual anyway, didn't we, on Teams and Zoom and so on. And we metamorphosized and went into, beaming through into Teams and Zoom. And actually then it had gone from something that was very scary in terms of, from a financial point of view, as well as the impact on the BDA's outputs and so on, into then being very successful, actually, because people were thirsty for information and so on. And we changed our remit. So actually, one of the big changes I think I've seen is the fact that now, even though, we're post-COVID now, certainly still a lot of the training that we do is virtual. And what I think that means is, whereas I suppose, pre-pandemic, people would say, right, we want you to come in, deliver some training. Everybody's blocked their diary out. You're going to come in all morning and you go into this room and so on. And it felt like a big event. And, that was wonderful in its own way. I think what it means now is that the information is so easily accessible now. And I think this, talking about, what we were just saying earlier, what's made some of these changes, I actually think, chatting about it now, it's making me think maybe this was part of it as well, because often as well, we do a lunch and learn, it's an hour, and you see folks, they're tuning in from their desk, eating a sandwich, listening in. You can see, they're really engaged, and then go back to the day job. It's not this massive, impact on working life in terms of disrupting things. And so I think it's been able to assimilate into people's work in practice in that way, and more accessible with webinars and, the podcasts and so on. So I think that's made a big difference. In terms of, what we may share, I think, in terms of content, yeah, we talk a lot about lived experience now. Yes, we talk about, and I certainly do, because this is my absolute passion. I talk about the gifts and talents that we often associate with neurodiversity, and then I talk about the challenges. And that's a difference, because certainly, for many years, we just used to talk about the challenges and what do we do to overcome this barrier. And yeah, of course, we still talk about that. But we talk about, this is somebody who's potentially got these fantastic gifts. And we encourage organisations to look at what the requirements of the day job, and then look at what we're saying that, neurodivergent folks are often really good at. And, it's so pleasing, Matt. There's not one organisation that I've ever worked with when we've done that exercise with them, have said, oh, actually, we don't really want lots and lots of neurodivergent people here. They've all said, we want more and more neurodivergent folks because actually it's a perfect fit for what we need in our day job, whether that's British Aerospace, and I often quote this, and I know they don't mind. When I worked with them, I said, what do you guys actually do in your day job? And they said, Donna, we fix warships. And I thought, what a cool way to explain the day job. So whether it's that, whether it's the police, whether I go and work in the beauty industry, catering, supermarket, they all come to the same conclusion. Actually, what we need, our job specification, what somebody with neurodiversity potentially is bringing with them, perfect fit. Actually, we want more of these individuals, please. Let's figure out how we bring down any barriers we have in our recruitment and so on, because we want more of these folks within our organisation. And so these are some of the changes, I think, Matt, beyond the way that we deliver training, as I say, lots and lots of virtual now, is actually the messages, I think, are changing, which again, very pleasing and very privileged for somebody like me to be able to be part of that, really, and share that.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And it's really great to hear how excited you get about the change and how the change come around. And it's, of course, I hadn't really thought of the working from home during COVID, and people are able to just drop on seminars for a few hours. And I guess the cost of virtual seminar is different to booking a conference room out in a company and doing it in person. So would have been a lower risk for companies as well, if we look at it in money terms.
And this is all the factors, isn't it? We've got to be real. These are all the considerations, and people having a lot of time away from their desk and the disruption. And now, we did a lot of conversation starters during dyslexia awareness time here at Succeed. So that's 1 hour, me coming in and joining folks. I've never been so busy. But I had a packet of throat sweets. I won't say the name, but cough sweets right by my computer because I was losing my voice. I was delivering so many of these talks. So because we were absolutely inundated, and it's so, as I say, it's really satisfying because you can see people. For some folks, I know we're talking about it now, everybody knows about dyslexia and so on, but there's still a lot of people who don't know a lot. And it's so great to see people who don't know a lot but want to find out more, thinking, right, okay, this is really interesting now. And now we're going to absorb some of these ideas into our practice. So yeah, it has definitely been a game changer, the technology, Matt.
Yeah. And that brings me sort of neatly on. You mentioned your job at Succeed. Obviously, we've spoken a lot about the time at the PDA and kind of charted the history, taking the opportunity to kind of plot how dyslexia looks like from the kind of working within industry of it rather than sort of being a person with dyslexia in their life. So it's been really fascinating. But you now Succeed with Dyslexia and have been there for just over a year, I think, when I checked. I guess that's a different pace to the BDA being a different organisation and a lot younger organisation as well, because I remember it being set up and people running upstairs of a building saying they were the CEO and things like that. So, and various campaigns and stuff. So, how are you finding? Well, let's do this actually. So, What is different about Succeed that you think compared to when you worked at BDA? How does the job in the organisation feel different? What makes it a different place to work, I suppose, would be a good place to start?
Yeah, and it's a great question, actually, Matt. When I stepped down from BDI, I thought I was going to be, almost semi-retired. And then Jack Churchill, who's one of the founders of Succeed with Dyslexia, who I've known for many years through BDI, actually, and he's a great advocate and ally in the community, said to me, Donna, do you want to go on an adventure? And I said, depends what it is, Jack. And he said, we want you to come on board at Succeed with Dyslexia. And I was aware of it. And to me, the difference, I guess, as an outsider being asked by Jack, would you like to come on board into the family, and now being in the family, I suppose it's more dynamic. And that's not to criticise BDA. BDA is still very dynamic. But I suppose, like you say, because it's a very young organisation, and because our remit is different, we don't have a helpline and so on like BDA does. We are able to be very agile and I suppose get very, very creative about how we work. So in some ways, for me, for my role, it's very similar to what I was doing at BDA, because I am head of training here. That was something I was doing at BDA and also involved in the assessment. But then there's another part of what I do here that's very new. So I was never really somebody who would be doing interviews on YouTube and things like that. Succeed worked their charms on me, and that was something I've done, which I never would thought I would do. I'm quite a shy person in some ways, so yes, I've done lots of new things here. I suppose the main difference is that we can be very agile and we can be very, very creative at Succeed. What really drew me in, amongst lots of reasons, and it sounds quite simple, but it's very powerful, actually. It's the message of the organisation, Succeed with Dyslexia. The clue is in the title. And so we are very positive here. It's about, it's not about, positive and being very naive, but it's about hopefully, supporting folks to reach their full potential, sharing stories. And if we are going to address an area of challenge, we've done a lot of work around mental health, for example, and how it links with neurodiversity. The angle that we come to it, I feel, is very much Succeed's voice. So I think the youthfulness of the organisation to me was very appealing, the culture here. So to me, it felt like a nice complement to the journey I'd already been on myself as a professional. It felt like a great next step for me. We also, because of the support from Scanning Pens, we're in a lovely position that we can do a lot that is non-profit, so that we do a lot for free, which is, again, really important to me to be able to feel like we can give something back as well. Especially nowadays, Matt, isn't it? There isn't a lot of money out there. So we want to make sure people still feel supported, even if they don't have a lot of, money. And who does nowadays? So yeah, there's lots of it that felt like a great fit for me to where I was at in my career. So it has been an adventure. I was so glad that Jack Churchill asked me whether I wanted to go on an adventure or not. And it's been a great adventure.
Yeah, it's a bit of a step change if you were looking at semi-retirement and now you're on.
Isn't it just?
Now you're on panel talks.
The story of my life, Matt. This keeps happening to me. At some point, I am going to have a rest.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because you say it's sort of semi-retirement, and then it's all like, I see you appear up on YouTube channels, chairing panel talks and all sorts of stuff like that.
I don't know how it happens. I'm just, I can't complain. I love it, but yeah, I don't know how it happens sometimes. I just try and go with the flow.
Yeah, and how obviously the non-profit angle works quite nicely, and Scanning Pens is there as Jack's other company that does turn a profit, from what I can tell.
Yes.
And that allows you to get into training assessment. What's this kind of interesting thing that you found with Succeed, and where have you been with them that really sort of sparked your interest? Like, hey, that's kind of cool.
I think A personal standout moment for me was I got to interview the Children's Commissioner for England, Dame Rachel de Souza. So that was something I never thought I would do. So we've had some wonderful guests on our, I suppose, interviews. They're not podcasts as such. I wish they were that, slick. I'm going to say slick, but I don't mean it as a criticism, but they're just very much a team's recording with some fantastic guests, and we put them on YouTube for people to enjoy. So that's been a standout moment. We also have some fantastic free, and as I say, this is what's the amazing part of what we do at Succeed. It's such a lovely position to be in, where we can do this work and then just give it to the community. The learning festivals that we do. So another standout one, it was just last year around criminal justice, and we spoke to so many experts. And what was an eye-opener for me was the fact that there's so much positivity in our criminal justice system actually around neurodiversity that often never makes the headlines. It never gets reported. The wonderful work that folks do there, the commitment. And actually, Succeed was able to give a platform to that. So I do suggest anybody listening to this who's interested, it's free. If you go onto our website, register, everything arrives in your inbox, all those wonderful talks, if that's an area you're interested in. And again, talk about VIPs. We've got Keith Fraser to open that for us virtually. These are virtual learning events. And he is the chair of the Youth Justice Board. So, it's having an address book of easy access, I suppose, to some very high level people. In training, I suppose it's the companies that I've worked with as well, Matt. My goodness, the list goes on and on. A standout moment, I suppose, last year was with Dyson. They gave me a round of applause
nice.
when I delivered my training. It doesn't always happen, but it's very appreciated. Lindt chocolate.
Oh, nice.
Lots.
How do you not get
I did have people in my life saying, Donna, can you get me a Dyson? Donna, can you get me some Lindt chocolate? No is the answer. But I just, the organisation's amazing. Lots of NHS trusts. So that's part of, for me, that's very much at my heart. The folks that you work with as a trainer, the reaction, the rapport, the great relationships afterwards, people keeping in touch is wonderful. So there's some of the standout moments, really, for me. So many to choose from, but yeah, just off the top of my head, I suppose there are a few.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've had a fun journey. And not a long time, to be honest. It sounds like you've gone to a lot of places.
We hit the ground running. It was already in a great place when I joined. And I've got the absolute pleasure. I've worked with some great colleagues. So Darren Clark was our CEO. I've got a great colleague in Vicky Hawkins. So yeah, there's been some great people here where, what it's like, Matt, the chemistry was right. So it's one of those moments where the company, the support, the management's great. And then you're so lucky to have some fantastic colleagues who you just get it. And so what happens is you're buzzing off each other because you've just got great ideas. And so it works. It was a great recipe for success in those ways.
Yeah, and that's cool. And if you had to succinctly, because BDA and Succeed with Dyslexia are both great organisations, and they both coexist in this world. And if somebody's listening who's like, well, why do we need multiple dyslexia organisations? What would be your answer to that?
I think because we all have different voices, and sometimes in our life we need different things. For BDA, Helen Arkell is another organisation. We're very lucky in the UK. We have lots of different organisations, charities. The services they provide, the guidance they give to families and adults, is second to none. And as I said, it's something I'm very proud of to have been part of that. It's changing governments' minds. It's supporting families and adults and kids on helpline. it's lots of things that an organisation like the British Dyslexia Association will do, which is really important. We need organisations like that because they are the ones who will fight for change and so on at that very top level. And then we have organisations which are equally important, I think, in different ways, like Succeed with Dyslexia. And they are the voices of hope, of, different voices that we don't always hear, that don't always make it to the mainstream. I'd like to think that's some of the work that we do here at Succeed, is to give the message of, this is the lived experience. This is our potential. If you have a challenge, this is what we're talking about. But hey, these are some of the solutions to that. And we always say, Matt, at the end of some of the things that we do at Succeed is, let's keep talking. And I suppose that's the message of Succeed. It's a platform, really, I hope, of communication and to encourage these conversations. To me, they are not mutually exclusive. Those organisations can all exist because, we all need different things at different times of our lives, isn't it? And I think that, as I say, in the UK, we're very lucky with the different organisations that are out there.
We most certainly are. I don't know if we are world leading in it, but it feels like it sometimes.
Something to be really proud of, I think. Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
So too. I do. We have a lot of organisations with a lot of clout, and I think a lot of clout overseas as well, particularly in the BDA's case. Okay, so every guest that comes on this podcast gets 3 rapid-fire questions from me to round up the podcast. Now, you've listened to this before, so you may know what's coming. So, of course, they don't need rapid-fire answers from you, but they're quick snippets from me. So let's dive into question number 1. What prejudice have you had about dyslexia that has been proven wrong?
That it's all about challenges.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think the challenge thing, as we discussed, alluded to earlier, where companies are seeing strengths in that rather than just seeing deficits or challenges.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So, if an alien landed and you had to describe dyslexia to them, how would you do it?
A different way to learn and a different way that a person's brain works. And in that difference, there's some fantastic gifts and talents and some challenges as well sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, nice succinct way of doing it. It's almost like you knew what I was going to ask you.
This is the benefit of being a super fan, Matt, isn't it?
Yes. And of course, the last question is set. And seeing as this is the Dyslexia Life Hack show, what is your favourite dyslexia life hack?
Oh, now this is a tricky one.
Obviously, you can't say just you succeed with dyslexia.
No, I won't say that. Don't worry. Do you know what I really like? And it's not techie; it's just a different way to work. And it's come into my life again. It's come in and out at various times. It's the Eisenhower matrix. So for those who aren't sure, please do Google it. Anybody listening to this. But it's a great way to filter information. So you've got 4 boxes, or they call them quadrants. I know that's kind of the posh word for it, but boxes. One is a task that's really important and urgent. And it's about figuring out, right, I've got to do that. So that goes in your first box. That's the really important stuff. Second box is something that's important, but maybe not urgent. And then box number 3 is what you can delegate. And then the final box is about what you can delete. And actually, as I work with folks and even use it myself, I actually think it's a great hack because it helps you to prioritize information and tasks that you may do. And I think it's very liberating that box number 4 is delete. Because I think a lot of us struggle by carrying tasks around with us, thinking, I must do this, I must do this. And in actual fact, you don't have to do it. And it's quite liberating to think that you're not going to do it and you're just going to delete it from that particular box on the Eisenhower matrix. So that's my hack. It's not techie.
No, doesn't
and
have
please
to be.
do have a Google if you've not heard of it before. It's really interesting and it does work. It honestly works.
Yeah, no, that's a nice little hack. And I like things like that, actually, because sometimes prioritizing things can be the problem.
Yes, for sure.
That particularly creative brains. You're like, well, we could just do
Yes.
all of this now. No. What is
Yeah.
my critical path through this?
Yeah. So Eisenhower matrix could be a friend there, Matt.
Yes. I'll have to scribble that down in my notebook next when I'm at work tomorrow and see what fits in everything. I know what my manager will say, everything's in the important bit.
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it?
It is,
right,
yes.
what's urgent and important, but what's important, but I can give myself a bit of time to do that.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's just a great filtering system, I think.
Yeah, and I think we all need sometimes a way of filtering and prioritizing.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I think something like that. And, Eisenhower was no small person, was he?
No. And it is named after the Eisenhower, so that president, if people aren't sure. So yeah, he came up with it.
Definitely. Okay, well, before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to add, and where can people find you if they want to?
Yeah, we'll Succeed with Dyslexia. I know you're going to put the links up. I guess, that speaks for itself, as does the BDA. Please do reach out. I suppose, again, something I often find myself saying is, for people to know they're not alone. I think sometimes I still work with people who, finding out they're neurodivergent, it's very, very emotional. And I think it does no harm to remind people that you're not on your own. And there's lots of organisations out there that can help. So I suppose my message is the one that we always share at Succeed, Matt, is let's keep talking. But also, I suppose, on a more serious note, is the people to know that they're not on their own. And we're very lucky in the neurodivergent community, and specifically the dyslexia world. There's some fantastic people like yourself, organisations out there. We're a great community, actually. So yeah, people aren't on their own. And I hope when people listen to podcasts like this, they feel that they're part of the community in that way too.
Hopefully so. Hopefully it'd be a success if they do feel like that when they're listening.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for spending the time this evening to have a chat with me. It's been really interesting hearing about your path through the world of dyslexia and actually be able to reflect back on how things have changed over the years.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. It's been really enjoyable.
No problem at all. And I want to thank everybody else for taking the time to listen, and I'll speak to you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.